combining functions. So for today's problems, we were given the function f of x equals 2x plus 5 and g of x equals negative 3x plus 9. So notice that those are defined at the top. Then we are going to work on adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing these functions and seeing what we get. I want to point out that there are different ways that we could ask this. So a says g of x plus f of x. I could have also written that as g plus f and then the of x. They mean the same thing. And it's telling us to add the functions. So we want to take the first one. Make sure you take them in the order they're written. So g of x, so negative 3x plus 9. Always use parentheses when you're plugging in. And then it says plus, and then we want to add f of x, 2x plus 5. Parentheses don't really mean anything for addition, so I can just add those up. Negative 3x plus 2x, 9 plus 5. This is what g of x plus f of x equals. Okay, moving on to b, f of x minus g of x. So again, if you want to see other notation that other books or maybe even SATs might use, it might say f minus g and then of x. It means the same thing. Get used to both notations. I'm going to take equation f, 2x plus 5, do it in the order they write it, and I'm going to subtract, use parentheses when you're plugging things in, equation g. This is where the parentheses are super important. That minus needs to be distributed to both terms in the parentheses. So 2x plus 5, distribute the negative and I get plus 3x, distribute the negative and I get minus 9. Most common mistakes are forgetting to distribute that negative. Now combine like terms, 5x minus 4, that is what f of x minus g of x equals. So hopefully you're doing pretty good. Make sure you write them down in order and use the parentheses. Moving on to c. F of x times g of x, other notation. F times g of x, same thing. It means equation f, 2x plus 5, times, so just right next to each other, right? Multiply, we just put the parentheses next to each other, negative 3x plus 9. You might know a couple ways to multiply those out. Most of us probably are going to use an area diagram. If you know another way, go right ahead. But you cannot leave it like that. If you left it like that on test day, it would not give you points. So make sure you take the time to multiply out your binomials, multiply them together. Just multiplying the edges. And then it gives me negative 6x squared, those combine to be plus 3x plus 45. This is the answer to f times g of x. Finally, division, f of x over g of x. Other notation could have been f over g and then the of x afterwards, means the same thing. Literally tells you put f of x, 2x plus 5, in a fraction over g of x, negative 3x plus 9. Okay, this isn't the best example to show this to you, but these almost never reduce. So like if this was a 9, you could not reduce it with that 9. That is not how it works. Or like an x on top and an x on the bottom, you cannot reduce these. Not until you get to higher levels when they match perfectly and there's a lot more things going on. So we would stop here, but you should notice there's an x in the denominator. And a lot of this chapter we've been talking about what happens when you divide by 0, right? You cannot divide by 0. So what would turn the bottom into 0? What would make negative 3x plus 9 equal 0? Maybe you can do this in your head. So if x equaled 3, the bottom would equal 0, and that's not allowed. So your solution is the fraction, 2x plus 5, over negative 3x plus 9, but it has an extra part, which is worth an extra point, comma, x cannot equal 3. If x equaled 3, you'd be dividing by 0, which is not allowed. So you have to include that x cannot equal 3. This whole thing, the fraction and it's called the restriction, x cannot equal 3, the whole thing is your answer. Make sure you write the whole thing to get full credit. So I wrote another problem, so flip to the back side of your notes or wherever you have some more space to do some practice problems, and see if you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide these ones. Why don't you go ahead, write it down, pause the video, and when you unpause the video, I'll have done part A and B. So go ahead and do A and B on your own, and then pause it, and then check your answer. Okay, there's my work and my answers for A and B. Hopefully those were pretty straightforward for you. There's no restrictions, there's nothing crazy you have to do. Just be extra careful with that negative sign and make sure you distributed it. Go ahead and try C. Pause your video and multiply out C and see if you get the same thing as me. Okay, check your answer to C. I multiplied them out on an area diagram, combined like terms, and there's my answer. Finally, D. Write the fraction correctly and see if you can get the entire answer correct for D. Okay, so I wrote equation F over equation G. Then I grabbed the denominator and set it equal to 0. I got x equals 2, so for my answer, x cannot equal 2. Make sure you include your restriction. Hopefully this helps you guys with combining functions.